It was 1 year ago that we watched in horror as rioters desecrated the United States Capitol, violently occupied the halls of Congress. Never could we have imagined that we would witness such a sight, the sacred temple of our democracy breached by attackers seeking to overturn the results of our election, our national leaders fearing for their safety, indeed for their lives. It's been disturbing to see the extent to which even recognizing those events, even talking about this day, have played into what has become a well-oiled, automated politicization machine that this past week prevented us from just coming together as a nation, all parts of our society and leadership, recognizing, ritualizing the events of that horrific day in our history. It's easy when looking back over the last couple of weeks, how our Torah portions strongly speak to our situation, past and present, in the United States. The political and societal developments of our moment exert an irresistible pressure upon us as we read the story in the Torah of the collision course run by a powerful leader of a powerful nation, one born into privilege and pride, with advisors who enable him against the eternal one who stands by those who serve that nation. Pharaoh is not simply opposed to setting the Hebrews free. He's not simply an unwise leader clinging to power. He's not merely reinforcing power by maintaining a narrative. He really needs to impose suffering on his own people in order to confirm to himself that he's in charge. Pharaoh needs to see the immediate results of his orders, creating chaos and suffering, so he can reassure himself that his orders make a difference. This sharpens our understanding of the opposition between Pharaoh and God. God keeps reminding us in these episodes that the divine name that's operative here is the four-letter name Yud-He, Vav-He, Adonai, one in which our sages understood as the profound meaning as referring to God as the compassionate one. Our Torah portion this morning, Bo, began with God explaining to Moses that God has hardened the hearts of Pharaoh and his servants. As we've spoken about and I've taught over the years numerous times, the Torah mentions the hardening of Pharaoh's heart 20 times in just a few Torah portions. The first 10 with Pharaoh hardening his own heart. And in the final 10, we're told that God hardens Pharaoh's heart. As I said, I've spoken before about the challenging concept of hardening or heaviness of the heart. How can Pharaoh be condemned for his intransigence if he's being forced into it by God? There are thousands of commentaries over the centuries about this question. Today, I share the modern psychologist Erich Fromm, who wrote that the Torah's description presents one of the most fundamental laws of human behavior. Every evil act tends to harden our hearts, that is, to deaden it. Every good act tends to soften it, to make it more alive. The more a person's heart hardens, the less freedom he or she has to change, the more that it's determined by previous action. But Erich Fromm says there comes a point of no return, when our hearts have become so hardened, so deadened that we've lost the possibility of freedom, when we're forced to go on until the unavoidable end, which is in the last analysis, as Fromm says, of Pharaoh, his own physical and spiritual destruction. As I look around to the world around us, I worry. I worry about the hardening of our hearts, that so many of us, myself included, suffer from compassion fatigue, fed up with the other side, as we are hopelessly, it seems, divided from the politics of elections to the politics of vaccines, to the point in which our hearts have been irrevocably hardened on a path to a cataclysmic conflict that endangers our democracy. I wish I could give you an uplifting message at this point in our history, but it's very difficult. Like the plague of darkness that we read about in Egypt, people could not see one another. During what seems to be a plague of our own darkness, we don't listen to one another, our hearts hardened. And so a deep darkness of division has descended on our nation, one that, as in my introduction to the Torah portion, of lech and bo, and a combination of a strong desire to envision and to follow through and to work untiringly, no matter how much we have that kaved lev, that heaviness of heart, and a bo, come, listen to each other. After the events in the Capitol last year, which we watched from Florida, I saved in my file a prayer which was written that evening by Alden Salovey, with which I will conclude, a prayer which still speaks to us this day. Oh, my people, what have we become as a nation? And what will we become in the wake of violence and insurrection, in the face of armed assault against our democracy? Rioting, criminality, domestic terror fomented death and destruction in the Capitol. This doesn't happen in the United States, but it did, and it can again. Woe to the land that teeters on the brink of disaster. Woe to the people, to us who stay silent. Woe to the politician who cannot stand against this outrage. Woe to us as the tide of history puts us in danger. Shame on those who have hardened their hearts, shut their eyes, closed their minds, and empowered those who attempt to banish justice and free elections from our midst, those who bring swords and guns against our sovereign land. You, God, who are our rock, our source and shelter, grant safety and security to the people and democracy of the United States of America. Protect us from violence, rebellion, intimidation. Save us from terror. Save us from leaders who cannot say no to our attacks on our legacy and our future. God of nations and history, let truth and justice resound to the four corners of the earth. Let the light of freedom always shine brightly in the halls of power as a beacon of hope for every land and for every people. And to that, let us all say, Amen.
Amen.
We continue now with the Chatzi Kaddish of the Musaf service.